Okay, well I'm going to show you how to make a forging press. These are all the things that I did to fabricate a 20-ton press. Now I don't know a whole lot about hydraulics. In fact, I know very little and almost nothing when I started. I know a lot more now, but I'm going to show you how to fabricate a frame that's going to hold up and that is going to be sturdy and that you can upgrade and you can repair. And so this is going to be an H frame. A lot of my design on this frame comes from either Big Blue or Dennis Tyrell's forging press on his channel, Tyrell Knife Works. He shows how to make one, or he just kind of gives a little overview of his. And I really liked his design, and I copied a lot of what he did, but also I really liked Big Blue's design, and I copied a lot of what they did. Now in this video I have a shop. I'm able to utilize forklifts, and I have drill presses and a nice big fab table, but everything that I do, you can build it on the floor. And you can get everything squared up and get everything tacked in place. And once you have a reference point, whether it's on the floor or on a table, everything is squared off of this reference point and you should be fine. This press design is from the bottom up. The hydraulic cylinder presses from the bottom up. I like that because I'm able to be eye level with my work. Now, all of these heights can be adjusted. You know, stand up, take a tape measure, hold your hands out like this, you know, pretend like you got a piece of steel, maybe even go grab a heavy piece of steel and hold it and see what height you like it, where it doesn't fatigue your arms, where you can see your work. You know, how wide do you want it? How tall do you want it? I made this press at the height that I wanted, that was comfortable for me, and you can do the same. I think overall, this press was about 5 feet tall from the floor to the very top. And it was about somewhere around 4-ish feet tall where my work was going to be. You usually don't need to open and close the press more than just a little bit at a time, pressing. And so that hydraulic cylinder rising doesn't make your work go up and down like this. It stays pretty still, and you can see it. And usually you're looking at the top anyway, so that top is stationary and the bottom is moving. So I think that's actually quite helpful. So this is my design that I chose based off of the studies that I looked at. There's all kind of designs, but this I think is the one that is the most sturdy and will hold up. My first mistake, I did not make a drawing of this. I did not have any plans, did not make any drawings, and that came back to bite me a little bit. I would suggest maybe watching this video, seeing things that could be improved or could be done a little easier or a little bit quicker or a little bit cheaper, and just kind of redirect yourself and make your own drawing. All right, there's my shop. There is my table. Now, you can use whatever you want. I've seen people use really heavy angle iron. You can use tubing, 1/4-inch wall tubing. This beam is about an 8 by 5 inch beam, and when you go to look for these beams, they're measured by weight per foot. You know, you can go into a fab shop or go into a steel supply shop and ask for an 8-inch beam by 5 inch, and they'll probably know exactly what you're talking about. And also the thickness of this beam was 3/8 of an inch. You can find these beams at scrap yards, salvage yards, even come to a fabrication shop and see if they'll let you buy scrap out of the dumpster. This is actually where I got this beam at. It was scrap out of a dumpster. It was about 60 inches, both of them, 60 inches each. That's 5 feet, and that's how tall I cut them. So if you don't have a saw, a torch will do, or if you don't have a torch, get a fabrication shop to cut them to length for you. I think my shop charges like $5 a cut, or you can get a portaband. So after I cut this beam, you just take a wire wheel on a regular angle grinder, and I like to clean all the rust and all the residue off of it. It could be rusty, it could be pitted, anything. It's really hard to clean once you assemble these things, so I like to clean everything as I go so I don't have to go back. Here I've deburred the edges. You can see the sanding disc. That's a 40 grit sanding disc there. So I want to talk a little bit about the hydraulic equipment that I purchased. It is pretty important to know what cylinder size you're going to buy before you start setting the parameters for your press frame and start building the frame. Because if you don't know your stroke length or how big your cylinder is or what kind of pin design that you have going for it or mounting design you have on your cylinder, it's you might wound up getting into a hard spot. So you need to do a lot of research on the type of cylinder that you want before you start building anything on your frame. When I went into this, I didn't know anything about hydraulics. I didn't know anything about pressures or what to buy or the parameters, and I had to kind of learn along the way. Now, I bought things that were suggested to me by other people and other YouTube channels and things like that. So what I wound up getting, sort of unbeknownst to me, was I wanted a 30-ton hydraulic cylinder, but I wound up getting about an 20-ton hydraulic cylinder, which has turned out to be plenty because I do regular conventional blacksmithing as well, and I have tapered 1.5-inch solid round on this thing, and it works just fine, especially if you make the right kind of dies, fullering dies, sharp dies, round dies, and it does a really good job, and I'm pretty happy with it. Would I rather have a 30-ton? Possibly, I guess, but I'm happy with this. Once you get your cylinder picked out, you're going to need to figure out what to buy in order to run that cylinder to make it go up and down. Tank size, what size motor, you're going to need to know a pump that matches well with it. And all in all, it looks very intimidating, but it was quite simple. I'm not a hydraulic specialist, and I had to call a couple guys on the phone just to figure out what to do, and it was just really stupid, simple stuff that that I wasn't aware of. So the cylinder that I wound up getting was it had a 4-inch bore, and the pressure was about 3,000 psi, had a 2-inch rod, and it had a 10-inch stroke length. I'm really happy with the 10-inch stroke length. You don't really need more. And if you do need more, then you need to buy a power hammer. Sometimes the bigger bores come with maybe a slightly longer stroke length, and that's okay. You just need to figure out where to set or where to install the cylinder in the press frame. How far up, how far down to make your brackets to hang it into the press frame. As for the motor, you're definitely going to want a 5 horsepower. That's what I'm running this cylinder with, is a 5 horsepower electric motor. Now, you most likely want a 3-phase. Go ahead and get the 3-phase if you got the hookup for it. Now, I did not get a 3-phase motor. I wound up getting a single-phase motor because at the time I was building this press, I was a little worried that I might have to move it and put it in my garage temporarily and use it and produce a couple of jobs in my garage until I could move into a new shop. So I went with a single phase just out of desperation, needing to continue to run my business and produce work. But I do suggest getting a 3-phase 5 horsepower motor. The pump that I got to pump this is a 13 gallon per minute pump, and it's a 2-stage pump. Make sure that your shaft is the same. I think the shaft that I wound up getting was a 1/2 inch shaft on the pump, and then it was a 5/8 shaft on the motor. So I wound up having to buy this little coupler, which they do sell at Tractor Supply and Northern Tool and all this stuff. And it was a little coupler, a little reducer. You can get them on Amazon as well. It's a little reducer that goes on there, and it works just fine. I made up a little bracket. The pump mounts on the bracket. Motor sits on another little bracket, and the reducer hooks between those two, and it's just fine, works fine. And you're going to need to get a oil filter for sure. And the oil filter can be just a standard oil filter that you find in the hydraulics section at Tractor Supply. That's just what I bought. It seemed to work fine. I bought mine on Amazon, but it was the same type that Tractor Supply sells for log splitters. This is basically a log splitter. The control valve is a 1x13 log splitter control valve. Now I got one that stands up like this and has the control arm coming out like this, so you can move it like that, just like a log splitter. It was able to screw out, and then the control arm was able to mount like this, so you could operate it like that. But I had an idea for how I wanted my pedal system to go, so I made sure to get one that was mounted straight up like this, and then the control arm came out like this. Just one control arm. You need to make sure that it has a neutral, and it goes up, neutral, and it springs to neutral, and then goes down, and then springs back to neutral. That's what you're going to want to get. The lines that I got were 1/2-inch lines. Everything that I wound up getting was, my lines were male on both ends, just a male to male 1/2-inch line. I didn't really need anything more than 24 inches. I did get one, I think, that was 36 inches. I would suggest just holding off buying those. Wait till you kind of get your setup welded in place the way that it's going to sit there, and then run to the store and pick you up some hoses. They were NPT hoses, which is basically a pipe thread where it's narrow at one end and gets bigger. And fittings were a whole nother different world. They caused me a lot of trouble because I had to learn about SAE fittings, orb fittings, and MPT fittings, and what fit where. Everything that you buy should tell you what type of fittings it takes. A number 8 orb fitting, SAE number 8, number 10. It should tell you, and you can buy every elbow and every adapter in the world. And I will tell you this, I wound up putting Teflon tape on some of my MPT fittings, and I called up a hydraulics shop because I had a really stupid problem to where I had lost the Woodruff key out of the pump, and I had to call them, and I didn't know that I lost the Woodruff key, and I called them up saying, "Why isn't this pumping? It's turning on." And they said, "Is the Woodruff key in it?" And I looked, and the Woodruff key wasn't in it, and the motor was just spinning round and around and around on the pump, and I couldn't get any pressure. Well, anyway, I sent a picture to the guy, and he said, "Send me a picture. Let me see what's wrong with your setup." And I sent him the picture, and one of the things that he did say was, you could suck air with the Teflon fittings. It's best not to put any Teflon tape on the fittings. And I did not put them on the SAE fittings, but I did put them on the NPT fittings, the pipe thread fittings. And he said, don't do that. I did put Teflon tape on my suction port, which was a 2-inch suction port, and I had to reduce that down to a 1-inch. And then that's just a clear line that doesn't have any pressure. It just, the pump it's just what the pump draws from. So you don't want Teflon tape because it can suck air. Air causes cavitation. Cavitation erodes your internals. It can in your pump, from what I understand. And it also can in the control valve as well, and it'll erode it, from what I understand, very quickly. Your unit might not even last a year if you have too much cavitation. So good tight fittings should do the trick. The pump and the control valve that I did buy both have a relief valve in it, and you are going to have to set those relief valves in order for your motor to turn and pump. And then when it gets to a stopping point, those relief valves pop open and let your fluid circulate while your press is on sitting still. And then when you close one valve, it opens a chamber, and that chamber goes through the control valve and fills up your cylinder, and your cylinder extends. And then when you let off the pedal, it stops, and then that relief valve pops open again, and then you start circulating oil, and it's able to just to sit there at the point that you stopped it at. So relief valves were built in to both the pump and the control valve, so I did not have to buy any relief valves. Also, one thing that I did not put on my press was a pressure gauge. In order to properly set your relief valve, you will need a pressure gauge. So get a pressure gauge so you can properly set your relief valve and understand how much pressure your fluid is at. I did not put a pressure gauge on my system because I just went by sound and feel, and that was stupid, and I was trying to hurry, and I had a job that I needed to knock out on the press, and I didn't have one at the time. I'd forgotten to order one or pick one up, and I just didn't put it on. I was eager to see it work. If I was building this to sell to someone, I would have definitely taken a little bit more time on some things on this press. Now we're starting the fabrication, and we are going to find how wide we want our workspace. You need to find a stationary place to put one beam, and what we're going to do is we're going to do what you call cross squaring. And you can do this on the ground. We're going to get our one beam stationary. We're going to measure 12 inches between the two beams, inside to inside. We are going to take a square, like you see me doing here, mark 12 inches over, draw a reference line, and then knock that beam down to the reference line, the other beam. Now, this is not square. It might look square, it might be close, but this is not square. 12 inches, there we go. There's my overall width. All right, so here's how we cross square. Once you have your beam exactly, dead on to the 16th, to the 32nd, even to the 64th of your tape measure, you are going to go from corner to the inside of the tape on one side. You're going to draw your tape diagonally to cross square. Again, you can do this on the ground. Now, what I suggest doing is, if you're doing this on the ground, get you an extra piece of angle iron, piece of tubing, a big old thick heavy piece of tubing. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to clamp that tubing to the pieces. Have those two beams sitting like you see them sitting on the table here. And then you can take that piece of tubing and lay it right on top, and take you a couple C-clamps and clamp the tubing to both pieces crossways on your I-beams. And what that'll do is that'll bring them all to the same plane. Tack that piece of tubing to the beam and just keep it straight and keep it flat while you're building your other pieces. You can cut it off later. So you got your beam in place. You have it stationary, maybe a couple clamps. If you don't have clamps and it's on the ground, sorry, just leave it there. Now, you take beam number 2 and you want to get 12 inches this way. That's what I did, 12 inches. You can do more. You can do 14 inches. You can do whatever you want. And you place your second beam here. Actually, you're going to want to draw a reference line down here just for ease. You don't have to, but I like to put a little reference line down there. All right, and then you are going to take your second beam, bring it down to the reference line. This beam can be moved up and down. You're going to want that beam to be moved up and down. This is dead on. This is dead on. Okay, both these measurements, if you're setting them at 12, set them dead on at 12. You're going to take your tape. You're going to hook it right here in the corner. You're going to draw your tape into the inside of the tape. That means if your tape is coming like that, your tape measure looks like that, and you have your lines like that on your tape measure, make sure that you're measuring right here to the inside of your tape. Can you measure to the outside? Yes. But if you're doing it over here, then when you go over here, make sure that your lines that you're measuring on this side of the tape. You're flip-flopping the tapes when you go this way and this way. Okay. So you're going to draw your tape like this. And you're going to find that measurement right there. It might be 96 inches, might be 72 inches, might be 100 and, I don't know, whatever inches. And so you're going to make a note and say it's 100 inches from here to here. Next, you're going to hook your tape right here on the corner, and then you're going to draw the tape this way and see what that measurement is. You want both of these to measure 100 inches or whatever the inches they are. You want this side to be equal to this side. And what that is going to do is going to make a perfect square. And so if one end is longer than the other, leave this one stationary. Then you're going to either want to go up to adjust your length, or you want to go down to adjust your length on this one. So this beam will either move up or the beam will move down to make it perfect. Again, you're going to want to keep checking this and keep checking this, because if you keep having to move this up and down to make both sides of these tape measures equal out to the same number, then this beam will probably scoot on you and get out of whack a little bit. So you'll have to keep checking this measurement. Once this is dead on, if you're building this on the floor, take you a big old piece of tubing, all right, and you can clamp a piece here. Clamp. You might have to go to the store and get you a couple of big old giant C-clamps, and you can clamp a piece here. You can clamp, bam, everything's straight. You can tack. You don't really want to put a big old bead on there, because then you'll have to cut it off, and you don't put it in a place that's hard to get to with a grinder. You want it in a nice, easy place so you can cut them off later. Now, your frame is now straight. Now that we have the frame straight and in this position and ready to be welded up, then we can start attaching our structural pieces here where everything will sit. Forgive my dirty fingernails. I've been painting. They get stained up with paint and all kind of stuff, and sometimes it doesn't come off for weeks.